Well, back again, are we? To another video in the short series of Fazbear Frights anthology discussions. This time about the second story, To Be Beautiful. On this channel, The Horror Homestead, with me, GiBi. In case this is your first video with me, hi. I talk about nonsense and I like to sound smart. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing and investigating To Be Beautiful, the second short story in the anthology Fazbear Frights. The entire book is called Into the Pit. Last time we discussed Into the Pit, so now we're going to be discussing the second story, To Be Beautiful. We're going to summarize the story, then we're going to analyze the story, and then we're going to talk about the deeper Five Nights at Freddy's lore implications of the story. At the moment, I'm a believer in Frights fiction, which is a Five Nights at Freddy's community fan theory, which states that this book is a book that canonically exists within the timeline of the games. So if you're a character from one of the Five Nights at Freddy's video games, you could go into a bookstore and read this book as published by the company that runs the restaurants. As this series goes on, I'm going to discuss evidence for and against this theory as I find it in these books. I do know a lot of details about these stories and future stories in the series, but this is actually my first time reading them. So with that context, let's begin. To Be Beautiful. The three stories that make up Into the Pit, To Be Beautiful, and Count the Ways are directly stated to be about wishes, and how the character's deepest desires have an unexpected cost. This is written on the back cover. With this knowledge going in, we can assume that one of the themes of this story is to be careful what you wish for, but we're going to actually go in and decide for ourselves what the theme is after we're done reading. I think we need to read the title at face value, so it's called To Be Beautiful. If we take this in the context of it being a wish, we can assume that it means that my wish is to be beautiful, or oh, how wonderful it would be to be beautiful. Before I start, I'm going to tell you to pause the video, to go and watch the movie Mean Girls, and then come back. That will be important. You done? You like it? Me too. It's a great movie. You go, Glenn Coco. Alright, so now the story will be a lot easier for you to understand because it basically rips off a lot of the imagery and characters from that movie. Alright, let's go! Page 1. Flat and fat. Those were the two words that Sarah thought of when she looked in the mirror, which she did a lot. This is not going to be me reading the book, this is going to be me discussing the book, and that's the first quote that we're going to be looking at in this English essay that I'm bringing you. The main character, Sarah, is ugly. Or at least that's what she thinks. The narrator says so. This is something we're going to be discussing a lot, which is the narrator an unbiased third-person perspective, or is the narrator Sarah? We're going to keep talking about that as we go. The book discusses Sarah, and it says that she is a curved belly, but a flat chest, and is shaped like a potato. She has a bulbous nose, she has big ears, and weird proportions. It compares her to a Mrs. Potato Head. Or not a Mrs. Potato Head, a Mrs. Mix and Match, because they can't use the copyrighted phrase Mrs. Potato Head. This is something I talked about a lot in Into the Pit, and it's going to be equally as confusing in this story later. Alright, she's not really bullied at school, it's just a lot of self-esteem stuff. She compares herself to the Beautifuls from school. The Beautifuls are this story's equivalent of the Plastics from Mean Girls. I'm sure that every time I wobble this book in front of the microphone, it sounds amazing to you guys. But yeah, so entirely self-invented, self-esteem stuff. It's important to note that mirrors are often used to symbolize the reflection of something, not like its true self. Sometimes it's opposite, sometimes the inversion. If Sarah is ugly in a mirror, that could be an inversion of her true self. Like, the mirror is lying. And again, we're going to discuss this more later because mirror imagery keeps popping up. Can I just say I hate how the first page in every chapter is black because it makes it impossible for me to read my own pen writing on those pages. Alright, so Sarah has photos of models and celebrities on the walls of her bedroom, and she aspires to emulate these people, at least physically. Their eyes were smoky, their lips full, their legs long. When she goes down to have breakfast, she describes her mother as having natural prettiness she herself lacked. There's a lot of physical descriptions of characters in the book, and that's obviously from Sarah's obsessive perspective. It also notes that her mother is dressed in a long floral print dress. This might imply that she, like the models, has long legs. Sarah's mom greets her by calling her Cupcake, which is obviously a perfectly normal pet name for a parent to give their child, but we the reader are supposed to obviously pick up that an overweight girl with body issues does not want to be called Cupcake. Sarah takes the bus to school. Typically, the narrative tells us that she actually misses the bus and has to walk. This means that the school is a short enough walking distance that she can be late to the bus, but not late to school if she walks. This is kind of important later. At school, she watches YouTube makeup tutorials on her phone. Throughout these stories, I'm always trying to figure out, like, when they take place. We know, because of later information, that this is happening after the FNAF 6 fire, but without that outside knowledge, we now have a firm earliest possible set date of this taking place, which would be like 2007, 2008, like when the first iPhones were coming out. The book spends an entire page describing the beautifuls as they walk down the hallway, from their hair color to their clothes. Again, the story focuses on these attributes, and it's doing this to show us how much these things mean to Sarah, because Sarah is the narrator. The literal narration, like the prose, is interrupted by Sarah's friend Abby speaking, and it's actually very interesting, because the book uses the typical method of indicating inner monologues by italicizing words, but this is now showing us that regular prose is also Sarah's thoughts. The quote is, "A white shirt with a black and white polka dot miniskirt for Jillian. A black and white striped... What are they, penguins?" A voice cut off Sarah's admiring thoughts. So the narrator equals Sarah. This will be on the test. Sarah's friend Abby mocks the way the beautifuls present themselves. Abby's opinion and stance on appearances will be important to the theme later, but it's kind of interesting to note that she's not above mocking the way that people look as long as it's popular people. Abby is wearing a hideous poncho and a long, loose floral print skirt. This is now 2 instances of floral print in this story, which somehow connects Abby, the best friend, with the mother character, but what's actually very interesting is a typo, because in this instance of floral print, there's a hyphen between floral and print, but when discussing the mother earlier, there wasn't. This needs to be fixed. Scott, update your book. Abby and Sarah reminisce about playing with Barbies as a kid, and they use the brand name Barbie. So they can say Barbie, but they can't say Mrs. Potato Head, and I don't know why. This leads to Sarah thinking about how Abby is still childish. Abby hasn't changed much since those days. She still wore her hair in the same braids. And Sarah thinks that Abby has the opportunity for beauty, meaning that she's pretty, but doesn't dress to accent her looks or to wear makeup or whatever, which Sarah disapproves of and thinks is childish. I'm going to go into much more depth about this in the theme section. But to Sarah, focusing on appearances is mature and grown up. Sarah had no beauty, and it tormented her. Abby had beauty, but didn't care about it enough to notice. Maybe Sarah doesn't notice her own beauty. Abby directly states that Sarah only admires the beautifuls and wants to spend time with them because they're like her new Barbies. She feels too old to play with real Barbies, so she wants to play with the beautifuls, who look like Barbies. Abby calls the beautifuls cheerleaders in a derogatory manner. This isn't really important to this story, but it will be important context to the next story, Count the Ways, so I'm going to highlight it now. The book mentions that there's a table of nerds who hurry through lunch so they can play card games, and I feel really attacked right now. Yes, I played Magic the Gathering during lunch period in high school. What's it to ya, huh? Magic was actually more of like a study hall thing. During lunch, we just kind of ate food and talked. We sat by one of the fire exits. It was really weird. Me and my friends and my girlfriend would sit in this weird hallway by the exit door for lunch. And it was mostly just talking. When Star Fox 3D came out on the 3DS, we played that sometimes. One time we stuffed a banana peel into a radiator, and it was there for at least a year because we kept checking on it. It might still be there now. I don't know. It's been over a decade. Sarah and Abby talk about what they do if they had $1 million. Abby would spend it on a nice vacation with her family, spending it with other people, but Sarah says she would spend it on herself, getting a makeover and possibly plastic surgery, which horrifies Abby. Sarah says that she'd fix her nose, and Abby doesn't think there's anything wrong with her nose, which confuses Sarah because she thinks her nose is so ugly and noticeable. This is yet more indication that it's all in her head, and it's not necessarily an objective fact that she's ugly. Whatever that would even mean. Sarah goes to the store after school and buys hair dye. She applies it wrong, and her hair comes out looking disgusting because she bleached it for too long. Her mom takes her to get an emergency haircut/dye it back to the original color, and then she goes to school the next day in shame. She accidentally runs into the boy she has a crush on, Mason Blair, and dumps her lunch tray on him by accident and gets, salad dressing all over him. Sarah decides she wants to walk home from school instead of taking the bus because she doesn't want to be around other people, and on her way home, she passes a junkyard. There's an old car in the junkyard that used to be blue, so it's either not William's car, or William's car is not blue. Those are the options. We're going to discuss this in a future story, I'm sure. In the trunk of the car is an arm. She goes to investigate it, and it's part of an animatronic. She wonders if she can pull it out, and she compares the situation to King Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. Much like the Into the Pit story, we now have a character comparing their situation to mythology, and specifically comparing themselves to a mythological hero. Sarah finally gets the animatronic doll loose from the trunk, and she describes it like it's one of the girls that she admires. It's this. Of note is that it says that she has Cupid's bow lips, as another reference to mythology. It also says, It looked like a robotic version of the gorgeous supermodels whose pictures hung on the walls of Sarah's room, which immediately tells us that Sarah wants to look like this doll. It's like the transitive property or something. It was beautiful. This line is important for two reasons. One, the doll is literally trash, so I guess trash can be beautiful, kind of relevant to the overall theme. And the other is that the story is telling us that Eleanor is beautiful. Her name's Eleanor, by the way. When you see a phrase like this in a story, it should be a flashing light that you should take this term and you should swap it around. So Eleanor is beautiful. So we should look at other times in the narrative when the word beautiful is written, and we should swap it with the word Eleanor and see if that tells us anything. Likewise, we should take times when the name Eleanor comes up and swap it with the word beautiful to see if that gives us more meaning to the work. I will be getting back to this in a second. Sarah takes the doll home and cleans it up. In this section of the book, the text calls it a doll, a robot, a girl-shaped robot, this thing, it. Sarah also, we learn, has a brother majoring in computer science and thinks that this robot might be something he could have worked on. Sarah turns on the robot, it starts talking, introduces itself as Eleanor, and says, "You did something nice for me. Now I must do something nice for you. What do you want, Sarah? I want to make your wishes come true." The back of the Into the Pit book states that the theme of the three stories is wishes going wrong. So this is now Sarah's wish. Nothing really, Sarah said. It wasn't the truth, but really, how could this robot make her wishes come true? So we know that Sarah's wish is to be beautiful, but the story doesn't really have to say that it's obviously impossible for this robot to make her look beautiful. Sarah also knows that it's impossible for this robot to make her look beautiful. And so Sarah, much like us the reader, should see, once again, warning signs, red flags, when the robot tells her that she can make her beautiful. Eleanor brushes Sarah's hair out of her face and asks her again what she wants. The hair brushing is obviously to remind us about the fact that she messed up her hair trying to make herself look beautiful previously. And so Sarah finally says, "I want to be beautiful." Title drop. Into the Pit also had a title drop. I wonder if all of these stories are going to have title drops, so we'll see if this continues. So if we swap the word beautiful in this sentence with Eleanor, because Eleanor is beautiful, then you could read this as her saying, "I want to be Eleanor." Eleanor tells Sarah that she needs 24 hours to complete her wish, and so Sarah goes to sleep. She wakes up the next morning and sees Eleanor sitting in the corner, deactivated, and wonders if the whole thing was a dream. Eleanor was no more alive than the stuffed Freddy Fazbear she'd had on her bed since she was 6. This is the only mention of anything Freddy's related in this entire story. Sarah gets home from school, Eleanor moves around and talks to her, which doesn't surprise Sarah, which kind of contradicts the fact that the last section talked about her wondering if the whole thing was real. Based on the formatting, I wonder if that entire section was a late addition to the story just to put in some reference to Freddy Fazbear in this book. I'm gonna have a picture of it on screen. It really looks like it could have just been added in post, and then they kind of forgot that Sarah goes from thinking it's not real to then talking to her again, and now she doesn't question it being real. Alright, so Eleanor gives Sarah a necklace, which is obviously a symbol of beauty, femininity, etc., and tells her to wear it and keep it on. Each day she'll be more beautiful, but she has to never take off the necklace. This is a classic horror/morality tale setup. There's the magic girdle and the Green Knight that he can never take off, although that one's not really magical. There's the story of the girl who has to keep a ribbon on her neck and you can't ever take it off, and then the husband takes it off and her head falls off. Ooh, those are my two examples. Eleanor tells Sarah that she has to sing her to sleep for the magic to work. This is never explained in the story. I don't know why it would be necessary using FNAF lore. The song she sings is really dumb. Here you go.
Go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, my sweet Sarah. When you wake, all your dreams will come true.
This song is repeated multiple times in the book. It is not important. There's nothing to read into it. It doesn't even rhyme. Sarah wakes up and her arms are longer, and her skin is smoother, and her nails are painted pink. This plays with the idea that as you grow up, your arms are going to get longer. She'll one day be able to choose to have her nails be pink, and so she's going to wake up with this kind of body one day. By wishing to be beautiful, she was basically also wishing to be older. Sarah's mom thinks she looks nicer and asks her if she's been taking her vitamins. She also mentions checking in on her last night and that she was zonked out asleep. So I don't know where Eleanor was when the mom was checking in on Sarah, but obviously she didn't see her, or else she would have mentioned seeing the giant animatronic doll in her daughter's room. That day at school, one of the beautifuls compliments Sarah's nail polish. We also learn that it's winter. This is going to be important to the epilogue of this book. Sarah asks Eleanor again why she's granting her wish, and Eleanor says it's because she saved her, cleaned her up, and brought her back to life. This is obvious foreshadowing that Eleanor is taking Sarah's life force or body or something. Eleanor reminds her to not take off the necklace, sings her to sleep, and the text says, Sarah fell asleep before she knew what hit her. Which makes me imagine that Eleanor is lulling her to sleep and then knocking her over the head with a baseball bat. I know that's not what it's intending, but now there's half of the stuff I'm pointing out. It's just funny. Sarah wakes up and she has longer legs, so she decides to wear a dress to school to show off her legs. She takes a page out of Oswald's book and drinks orange juice for breakfast. The orange symbolizes badness. The next morning she wakes up to check what parts of her were upgraded. Now we're using tech terms to refer to her physical body. She's now thin and toned, and she's round in a feminine way. And she asks her mom if they can go to the store to buy her new clothes that weekend because she's going to need a bigger bra. She goes to school, and now all the boys are looking at her. At school, Sarah could feel eyes on her. Boys' eyes. For the first time, she felt noticed. She felt seen. It was dizzying. Exciting. In the hall on the way to English, a trio of boys, cute boys, looked at her. Then looked at one another and whispered something. Then laughed. But it wasn't a mean or mocking laugh. I think there's a really, really cool word choices here in that passage. The boys are looking at her, the obvious implication being that she's more attractive, so they're looking and whispering about how hot she is or whatever, but they're looking at her, and Sarah feels seen. The book says this twice, that she felt noticed, that she felt seen. But looking isn't seeing. Feeling seen usually means that people are appreciating you. It's a slang term, so it's not like there's a dictionary definition or something, but the first result on Google is from medium.com, and it says that being seen means being understood by someone else in a significant and empowering way. I feel so seen right now, fam, because you liked this video and subscribed. But the boys aren't seeing her in an empowering way. They're looking at her chest. But to Sarah's skewed mindset, she only identifies herself as her own beauty. And beauty is obviously something that other people have to label you as. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So to her, being ogled at by cute boys is the only aspect of her identity that she cares about. So she does feel like they understand her because her physical appearance is the only thing about her that there is to understand. To anyone else, being looked at and being seen would be completely different things. It's only to Sarah that they're the same because she only cares about her appearance. She runs into Mason Blair, that's the cute boy that she dropped the food on, and they bump into each other again, but this time he thinks it's cute, and he starts calling her Salad Girl in a pet name sort of way. That night, Sarah asks Eleanor to change her face. She wakes up and she looks beautiful. Oh my god, it's so cool. She goes to school, she sits with the Beautifuls, they befriend her. She lies about being rich and going into the city and all that stuff. We learn that her dad left their family or something, but now she's fitting in with the cool kids. This is when Mean Girls happen. This is literally just Mean Girls for the rest of the story until the animatronics come in. The Beautifuls ask her if she has a boyfriend, and she tells them about her crush on Mason. Then she goes and talks to Abby, who she now kind of feels that she's too cool for. The text, as always, describes Abby's physical appearance, mentioning that her bulky sweatshirt doesn't show her shape. Abby then calls the Beautifuls shallow, and Sarah gets mad and wonders why Abby has to be so judgmental. This is obviously ironic, and it's hypocrisy, because Sarah was just being judgmental about Abby's clothes. So the moral of this argument seems to be that you can judge other people for their personality and shallowness, but not for their clothing. Not if they wear baggy clothes. That's bad judgment. But good judgment is that they're cheerleaders. Cheerleaders are bad people. That's the moral of the story. Again, this is going to be contradicted in count the ways. That's why I want to bring it up right now. I really wish that this part was cut. I like how the story is currently using the fact that Sarah is the narrator to have the text of the story agree with her false and skewed mindset. At the end of the book, when she has her epiphany and changes her mind, it's a lot more powerful to the reader because the book was kind of pushing that she was right the whole time. So when she ends up being wrong, it's a lot more powerful. Having Abby here as this voice of reason calling her stupid now in the middle of the story makes it a lot less mature and complex. So I wish that this part wasn't in here. Did you know that real beauty is on the inside? I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that Toto looks quite as cute on the inside. Yes, I did just wake you up for that bit, and yes, it was important. So Sarah hangs out with the Beautifuls, and they go to the mall, and they chill, and then she goes on dates with Mason. Oh my god, it's the best. High school is the best part of your life, and it ever will be, and this is just how it is, and Sarah is so cool. And then one day at lunch, the Beautifuls start making fun of Abby, and Sarah admits that Abby was her friend, but won't won't say that she was her best friend, and also won't join in the laughter, but she does smile as if she's part of the gang just making fun of this other girl. And then right after this moment of betrayal, she goes and she's gonna go throw her food away, but she slips on the cafeteria floor and she falls down, and the necklace falls off of her neck. The Beautifuls start laughing at her for being a klutz, so even though she's one of their friends now, they're still gonna laugh at her when she messes up. Abby goes to help her, and then people start to scream. People are screaming and running to go get help. And after a page of build-up, Sarah finally looks down at her body and sees that her body has become a jumbled collection of gears and bicycle spokes and hubcaps, rusted metal odds and ends, cast-off useless parts that belonged in a wrecking yard. She's literally turning to trash. Eleanor has been replacing her body parts with trash, and the necklace kept up the illusion. She locked eyes with Abby and saw her friend's horror at what she was, at what she had become. This has a double meaning, obviously because she's literally turning to trash, but also because she's now a mean and a rude person, so Abby's upset about the person that she's become. Sarah runs home, and people walking and driving by notice this trash monster running down the road. The book says that it felt like it took hours, but we know that her house is close enough to the school that it could be walked to in a few minutes. Obviously, feels like hours does not mean it was actually hours, but still I felt like it was worth pointing out. She searches the house for Eleanor, but can't find her. Her ability to speak is fading as she turns more and more into a trash monster. She then knocks over some containers in her garage, and bags of body parts fall on her. At first, her brain couldn't even process what she saw. One bag contained a human leg, another a human arm. They were not the body parts of an adult, and they didn't appear to be the result of an accident. Blood pooled in the bottoms of the bags, but the limbs had been severed neatly, as if in a surgical amputation. Another bag, stuffed with bloody, snake-like entrails and what appeared to be a liver, slid from the cabinet's shelf and landed on the floor with a wet splat. Why were there body parts in her garage? Sarah didn't fully understand until she saw the small bag that held a familiar-looking, potato-shaped nose. She screamed, but the sound that came out of her was like the squealing of a car's brakes. So Eleanor's been cutting her up, putting her body parts in the garage, and again the necklace then kept up the illusion and held her trash body together. "I made your wish come true, Sarah," the pretty robot said with another metallic giggle. And in return, Sarah noticed something she'd never seen on Eleanor before. A heart-shaped button just below Eleanor's throat that was a double of Sarah's heart-shaped pendant. Eleanor laughed again, then pushed the heart-shaped button. She jerked and shook, but she also visibly softened, her silver finish turning the pinkish shade of Caucasian skin. In a matter of moments, she was a dead ringer for Sarah, the old Sarah, the real Sarah, the Sarah who, looking back on it, hadn't been so bad-looking after all. The Sarah who had spent way too much time worrying about her appearance. Abby had been right. She had been right about a lot of things. So the necklace transferred energy or something into Eleanor, who now looks identical to Sarah. I think it's likely that in an earlier draft of the story, Eleanor probably put Sarah's actual body parts over her, because that would make way more sense than whatever this is. And I guess that they would have changed it because it would have either been too dark or because it contradicts something that Eleanor has to do later. But yeah, I don't know why else she would keep the body parts in bags in the garage. The story then ends with a horrific scene of Sarah dying. In an old mirror propped against the garage wall, she saw herself. She was no longer a pretty girl, or a girl at all. She didn't resemble a human of any kind. She was nothing but a rusty, dirty pile of junk. She felt sad, then she felt scared, and then she felt nothing at all. So she once again looked in the mirror and saw herself as trash. But now she actually is. Alright, analysis. I think it's obvious from reading the story that Sarah is not actually ugly. She just has a self-image problem. No one else thinks she's ugly, no one else says she's ugly, or Abby doesn't, her mom doesn't, and in the end she realizes that she wasn't either. The book's narrator is Sarah, and thus all the text is biased by her perception. The narrative is able to clue this into us in very subtle ways that I actually really liked. On page 85 it says, "None of them even seemed to see her. They just kept right on with their conversations like she was invisible. If they couldn't see her, they probably couldn't hear her either. She felt like a ghost. But when she first passed the junkyard, which she calls hideous, she adds, because it was so horrible, she couldn't help looking at it when she passed by. So if something's hideous, you can't help yourself but looking at it. But no one looks at Sarah. Therefore, Sarah is not hideous. That's the transitive property or something. Alright, now I'm going to cover some cool things I found. Sarah had no beauty and it tormented her. Abby had beauty, but didn't care enough about it to notice. Okay, so this line from the beginning of the story is obviously the moral. Sarah does have beauty, she just can't notice it on herself. The book describes Sarah as mousy the day after her hair dyeing incident. She then runs into Mason again and gets food all over him, and the book says, "Sorry," she squeaked. I like that she squeaks because it continues that mouse imagery from earlier in that passage. I think one of the most important themes in the story is that Sarah equates focusing on appearances as being grown up. The other important theme would be that she cannot see in herself what she can see in others. So when Sarah is criticizing Abby, she says, "I have changed, I've grown up, and you haven't. I think about adult things, and you still buy stickers and watch cartoons and draw horses." Those adult things being like fashion and makeup and stuff. So the narrative shows us how silly this is, but Sarah doesn't get that message yet, because when she bleaches her hair, it goes wrong, and the text says, her hair was stark white, like she'd become an old woman way before her time. So her focus on beauty is making her grow up too fast, and of course the entire hair dyeing incident is a bad thing. Sarah sees it as a bad thing, we should also see it as a bad thing, but she doesn't learn that lesson that doing this bad thing is causing her to grow up too fast. She doesn't get that moral, but we as the reader should. Obviously, the tragedy of the story is that she doesn't get it until it's too late, even though there were opportunities for her to understand it sooner. After leaving the bleach in for too long, she then puts the hair dye in, and she actually doesn't leave it in for long enough. This could be symbolic of her not waiting enough proper time to grow up, her being in a rush to grow up. So instead of her hair turning platinum blonde, it turns sewage green. When her mom gets home, she shows her her hair. "I want it to be blonde, but you're green. I can see that." Green is another word for being young, so her mom is basically saying that she's acting immature, which again is in contrast to Sarah thinking that this kind of beautification is a sign of growing up. The book is basically hammering in that this isn't actually a sign of maturity. Being comfortable in your own skin is a real sign of maturity. She also thinks that the dye will make her look like a whole new person, which is important because later on, Eleanor actually makes her look like a whole new person. The book also says, how could she do something to make herself look pretty and end up even uglier than before? Which is, of course, how the story ends. She makes the deal with Eleanor to look prettier, and then ends up even uglier than before as a pile of trash on the ground. She asks herself why life is so unfair despite this being entirely her own fault. This is ironic. The day after her legs grow in, her mom notes how much more confident she is, and her mom says, "Maybe you just been going through an awkward stage the last year or so, and you're starting to outgrow it," which is showing that to her mother, a sign of aging is confidence. Growing up is confidence, not outer beauty. Sarah is still not getting this distinction. She's still equating growing up to beauty. The night that Sarah asks Eleanor to change her face, Eleanor basically spells all this out to the people who aren't paying attention. "I can do this for you, Sarah, but you have to understand it's a big change. You can look in the mirror and see longer legs or a curvier figure, and they just look like you've grown. Faster than expected, maybe, but still, growth is normal for a child." Because the story is equating growing up to this beautification standards that Sarah has. Sarah's rushing through life, and then whoops, she rushed so fast that she died. At one point in the story, the Beautifuls are talking about going to prom. Prom is only for juniors and seniors, which they're not. They're younger than that, so the Beautifuls all have dates that are older than them so they can go to prom. Sarah doesn't, and Mason isn't old enough, and so one of the girls is like, "Oh, if Mason was older, he could take you." And Sarah thinks she liked Mason the age he was, but she can't see the value in herself that she sees in other people. She likes Mason the age that he is, but she herself just wants to grow up. Very early in the story, her mom tells her that she's too young to worry about counting carbs, but then at school she wonders if maybe on her next birthday her mom will let her start wearing more makeup. So to Sarah, there's definitely an association between beauty and age, or I should say growing up and beauty. To use makeup and to be beautiful is an aspect of growing up. One of the things I really want to laud this story for is writing it entirely from the perspective of Sarah. She has a lot of very damaging thought processes and things that go on that are obviously not healthy, and you could write the story with a narrator who points out how wrong Sarah is about everything, but instead the narrator agrees with her, because the narrator is her. The whole book agrees with her, which I think is a much more mature way of telling the story, because it makes the reader work to understand the subtext instead of it just telling you the moral. It doesn't talk down to the audience, which I think is really cool. The book says that Sarah is right until Sarah herself realizes she's wrong at the end. While pulling Eleanor from the car in the junkyard, the text says, "Was it a discarded doll, outgrown by some little girl and tossed in the trash to end up in the dump?" The thought made Sarah sad. The idea of dolls is a recurring image through the story. Sarah and Abby play with Barbies, but Sarah has outgrown them. The Beautifuls are being called Barbies by Abby. If a little girl outgrows a doll, then that implies that she's growing up. In this instance, a little girl growing up out of a doll makes Sarah sad. And yet she tried asserting to Abby that she grew up because she stopped playing with Barbies. Again, what she sees in others, she can't see in herself. Sarah's able to see her own faults when they manifest in other people, but she can't see them in herself. The fact that the body that this little girl outgrew ended up in a dump makes Sarah sad, and this is of course what ends up happening to her. She tries to beautify herself, which she thinks will make her old, leaving her little girl self behind, and she ends up as literal trash. When thinking about Eleanor previously in the story, she thought, why would someone want to get rid of such a beautiful, perfect object? And then she ends up as Eleanor, and Eleanor ends up as her. The story ends with Sarah looking at someone in her body, like a mirror, which is how the book opened. But now with the ironic twist that she appreciates her appearance, but it's too late. She then dies literally looking in a mirror, seeing the reflection of who she actually is. The book refers to the mirror as her worst enemy, and Eleanor acts like a mirror, and obviously is her real worst enemy. And that's it for the analysis. Now we're going to jump into the Freddy Fazbear parts. Sarah decides that she wants to walk home instead of taking the bus because she doesn't want to be around people. Quote, given how her day had been, she didn't feel like she should take the risk of being with a big group of kids again. It would just be inviting disaster. That's probably how Baby feels after eating Elizabeth. She doesn't want to be with a big group of kids again, because it went wrong bad last time. She also passes an ice cream stand. This is a very baby-coded passage. Abby, whose name is an anagram for baby, eats baby carrots. I don't think there's any link between the Abby of this story and the Abby of the FNAF movie. It's just a name. Abby tells Sarah that she looks nice. So Abby is the opposite of the mirror, which displays how ugly she is. And Sarah has her self-esteem issues affirmed by Eleanor, and Eleanor is baby. So Abby is like the angel on her shoulder, and Eleanor is the devil, and Eleanor is baby, and Abby and baby are anagrams of each other. There's something there. I don't know what it is. Abby says that Sarah used to have pictures of cute baby animals on her walls that she's now replaced with these models and celebrities. Eleanor, when she's introduced later, has her appearance compared to those celebrities, so it's like Sarah is replacing babies with Eleanor, because Eleanor is baby. There's something there. And obviously there's the necklace. Sarah wearing it makes her able to act like a human even when her insides are literally junk. It's not an illusion disc. She still has to eat, she can still be alive, but once the necklace falls off, she can't even move. She just totally falls apart. This kind of magic is not something we've seen anywhere else in the series. It's not illusion discs, it's not Remnant, it's not Nightmare Gas. Like, if they had swapped souls or something, that would make sense. But it's not like Sarah is now piloting this trash robot, because she literally falls apart when the necklace falls off. In this instance, the needs of the story take precedent over FNAF lore. The themes of the story matter more than the logistics of the FNAF logic and Remnant and animatronic and stuff like that, which to me put this very much in the camp of being non-canon. The guy tasked with writing fiction for Fazbear Entertainment wrote a classic morality tale, and because nobody in-universe understands Remnant, if you're not an Afton or an Emily, he didn't need to get the details right. Animatronics stole someone's appearance, that's what happens, it's whatever. Even the idea of Sarah hobbling down the street as she falls apart appears to be a parallel of Mike and Sister Location. It's a robot wearing a human skin suit. So if these books are canon in-universe, in the game's continuity, then the urban legend of a man who appeared to be puppeted by a robot can easily turn into this story. It's a game of telephone away from being something that actually happened that the public doesn't quite understand. And I think that's the intention. Mike's prom nod turns into the fictional story of To Be Beautiful. And that's To Be Beautiful. I'm going to rank my thoughts on the books as I read them, and I personally currently think that To Be Beautiful goes below Into the Pit. I just think that that story had much more substance. Thank you for watching. Be sure to be nice to each other in the comments. Consider supporting the creators you most admire. Never lose sight of the things that are important to you. And remember that Freddy stands for Friendly, Respectful, Engagement, Discussion, and Discourse Yields Success. The next episode on Count the Ways should be out pretty soon. Also, nobody has found the hidden Easter egg in my too long FNAF video yet. Some people have sent in guesses, and like I said last time, if you find it, you'll know. It's a deep-cut FNAF fun fact reference. You might need to use Google to verify some things, but like I said last time, there's no numbers to call, there's no secret websites to visit, just my channel with some outside FNAF lore logic knowledge. Obviously, I'll let you guys know if someone finds it, and whoever finds it first will get a huge shout out. I'll see you next time.